Let's move on to another question from the live audience. This one is from Paulogia. You've actually interacted with his work on your podcast. You've interacted with one of his videos. He's an atheist YouTuber. So he says, and he's giving a counterfactual scenario. He says, consider a notion that Peter and Paul were the only actual witnesses to the really risen Jesus. And he says, our gospels and creeds would then be legendary sources on this counterfactual scenario. Do other lines of evidence exist that contradict this counterfactual scenario?
Well, yes, all of the evidence contradicts that. I'm surprised he would ask that. First, the inference is mistaken. Suppose that Jesus only appeared to Peter and to Paul. How would that show that the gospel accounts are legendary fictions? It wouldn't show that at all. Peter was an eyewitness, and the traditional view is that his witness stands behind the Gospel of Mark. So that wouldn't follow at all. And Paul was in touch with the people in Jerusalem. Remember, he was in the employ of the Jewish authorities in Jerusalem to persecute the church. So he may well have known about the empty tomb and the postmortem appearance of Jesus even before his conversion on the road to Damascus. So when you've got two eyewitness sources that are that early, goodness sake, you can't infer that the gospel accounts are legendary fictions. Now, the second part of that question was, what was the consequent of the counterfactual again, Cameron?
He says, do other lines of evidence exist that contradict this scenario?
Yeah, and of course, in 1 Corinthians 15, 3-5, Paul says not only that Jesus appeared to Cephas, which is Peter, but he also appeared to the 12. And the appearance to the 12 is independently attested in John and Luke, plus Paul's own firsthand experience with the 12 when he visited Jerusalem in AD 36. So the appearance to the 12 is abundantly attested. And then Paul goes on to mention other resurrection appearances as well. So I think we have very good evidence that the appearances were not initially confined to just two people, Peter and Paul. And then, of course, we have, as I said before, these multiple independent traditions behind the gospel stories that also show that this isn't correct. So this is a hypothesis that has virtually nothing to commend it.
What if we modify the hypothesis a little bit? So Paul, he's a latecomer to Christianity with regard to the New Testament. The church exists prior to him joining it, right? So whatever tradition there is involving Jesus, Paul is against it. It pre-exists. What if we went with Peter and say John instead? I mean, that might make it the premise a little bit better. We've got a couple apostles, and Paul has some sort of nervous breakdown and joins the club, and I mean that makes it. I mean, Paul being a member of the initial conspiracy, that can't work. That wouldn't work. But maybe there is some other kind of one or two source. No, I see skepticism on your face here. It's not working.
I think you're going to make the hypothesis more plausible by strengthening the eyewitness testimony by including John. I took it that the questioner was not advocating some sort of outmoded conspiracy hypothesis, that this was the result of a Petrine and Pauline conspiracy. I thought he meant that there were only originally two resurrection appearances claimed, one to Peter and one to Paul. And then
I don't think he's saying these were only claimed. He's saying, let's suppose that the only people that Jesus appeared to were Peter and Paul.
Yeah, it doesn't follow from that at all that the Gospels are legendary fictions, much less that there's no evidence that hypothesis is false. All the evidence says that hypothesis is false. Nobody thinks that there were only two resurrection appearances, one to Peter and one to Paul. Nobody thinks that.